Hi there, class. Our last video was talking about some of the worries with the overall method of doubt that Descartes utilizes. This video is going to look more directly at the skeptical challenge posed in the first meditation and some of the responses that philosophers have developed in response to that kind of skeptical worry. So in the video, we're going to start just by reviewing what this dream argument is and the skeptical challenge that it proposes. And then we're going to look at Descartes' own response to skepticism, because remember, Descartes is not himself a skeptic. Then we'll look at what we might call the common sense response and the abductive response. So remember, this kind of argument starts with just an ordinary belief that we have about the external world around us. Like, I believe right now that I have a coffee cup in my hand. And it claims, well, in order to know that I'm holding a coffee mug in my hand, to know that ordinary claim about the external world, then I must know that I'm not dreaming. But then premise 2 says, but I can't know that. I can't know that I'm not dreaming. And so it concludes that that ordinary thing that I usually think I know, I don't actually know, because I haven't met these requirements for knowledge. I haven't been able to rule out these alternative possibilities. Now, one thing I want to make clear here is, notice, I use the example of my belief that I'm holding a coffee mug in my hand, but I could replace that with any other belief I have about the physical world around me. And so this is a challenge not to this one single belief. It's a challenge to any belief I get from my senses about the physical world. So the idea is, if I know anything about the external world, then I need to know that I'm not dreaming. But I don't know that I'm not dreaming. And so I don't know anything about the external world. So it's not just skepticism about one particular belief. It's a skepticism about all of these same kinds of beliefs. The other thing I want to stress here is, notice that this skeptical challenge appeals to a specific skeptical scenario, this possibility that we might be dreaming. But you could put in other kinds of skeptical hypotheses as well. You could say, in order to know these things about the external world, I need to know that I'm not the victim of an evil genius. Or in order to know these things about the external world, I need to know that I'm not in the matrix or in a computer simulation. Right, now, a common student response to this skeptical challenge starts out by just thinking, look, come on, seriously? I might be dreaming. I might be in a computer simulation. Like, this just seems silly. It's obvious that I'm awake right now. I mean, I remember waking up in my bed this morning. I can pinch myself right now. Now, my experiences in my dreams, they don't feel this vivid either. And weird things happen in my dreams. Like, sometimes I just jump up and fly around like Superman, but nothing weird like that's happening right now. I try to fly like Superman, I'm just stuck here in my chair. Similarly, a lot of times my dreams don't make sense. I'll be in my office at home and I'll open the door to my hallway, and inside of my hallway, I'll see like the Amazon rainforest. My experiences don't connect up with one another. But right now, my experiences do make sense. I get on my computer, I walk to my door, I open it, and I see my hallway. All of it connects up. So given all this, surely I know that I'm awake. It just seems obvious. Why should I take this possibility that I'm dreaming seriously? Now, this common reaction fails to fully grasp the problem that Descartes' raising. And he's not saying that your dreams are always exactly like reality. He's just pointing out that it's possible to have a dream where you wake up in your bed. I mean, it's possible for your whole life to be a dream. Maybe those things that you thought were awake were you dreaming, and the dreams you had were just dreams within dreams. You could have a dream of pinching yourself. You could have a dream that feels incredibly vivid and real, even if most of your dreams are faint and maybe you don't even dream in color. Even if that were true, you could have a very vivid dream that feels real. And similarly, even if weird things happen in most of your dreams, you could have a boring dream where nothing unusual happens. You could have a dream where you wake up, you go have breakfast, you go to your computer, and you see me talking about philosophy. It's not a particularly exciting dream, maybe, but it could happen. And similarly, you could have a dream where all the experiences make sense together. Even if sometimes you dream of being in your office, being at home in Alabama, and you open your door and you see the rainforest, there's no reason that means you can't have a dream where everything does make sense. And so the experiences I'm having right now, all of those could happen in a dream. And so my experiences don't prove that I'm awake right now. Now you might be thinking, okay, look, I'm starting to see the problem. Maybe Descartes' right. Maybe I can't point to anything that proves that I'm not dreaming, that rules out the possibility that I'm dreaming. But still, if I just hold up my hands in front of my face, it seems obvious that I know that I have hands and lots of other stuff about the physical world around me. So even if you feel the force of his argument, it just doesn't feel like that much of a threat. It just doesn't feel like it really gives me a genuine reason to doubt this idea that I know all this stuff. Now, if you feel that way, philosopher G.E. Moore attempts to take that idea and develop into a more detailed response to this skeptical challenge. And so you might like this kind of response. So there's two central ideas that I want to point out to this, what we might call the common sense response to skepticism. G.E. Moore thinks there's some knowledge that we have that doesn't require us to give an argument or proof. And he also thinks that we can know that an argument might make a mistake even if we can't show where that mistake is. So before we turn to the skeptical challenge itself, I want to consider a different example. Look, you know that 1 does not equal 2. Can you give a valid argument to prove this claim? For most of you, I'm guessing the answer is no. Unless you've had a lot of math where you've learned about set theory, etc., then maybe you can. But for most of you, I'm imagining you think, well, no, I know that, but I can't like write down a proof, an argument that goes from premises to conclusion to get to this conclusion that 1 doesn't equal 2, but I still know it. And so Moore might say that this is a common sense claim that you are able to know, even if you're not able to give an argument or proof of it. Now, to take this further, imagine someone gives you an argument that you're wrong about 1 not equaling 2. Now, to follow this argument, you need to know a little bit of algebra. If you don't follow all the steps of this, don't worry. But imagine someone says, look, imagine that A equals B. Let's just take that as an assumption. I mean, 1 equals 1, 2 equals 2, 3 equals 3. So whatever A is, whatever B is, just let's assume that they are equal. Well, if they're equal, then A squared is going to be the same as A times B. Now, I can subtract the same thing from each side, and they should stay equal. So A squared minus B squared is going to be equal to A times B minus B squared. Now, you can reverse that FOIL method that you learned in algebra to say, hey, look, that first one is just A plus B times A minus B, and that second one is just B times A minus B. But now, if this is the case, notice I can divide both sides by the very same thing. I can divide both sides by A minus B, and they should remain equal. And now I get A plus B just equals B. But remember, B is equal to A. So now I have 2B is equal to B. And now I can divide both sides by B. And so 2 equals 1. Look, this previous argument that 2 equals 1, it contradicts common sense. And it seems like you know that that argument I just gave you makes a mistake. But for a lot of you, I bet you don't know where the mistake is. Now, if you want to know where it goes wrong, the mistake is in the move from 4 to 5, because you end up dividing by 0, which you can't do. So now you know where the mistake is. But you knew there was a mistake before you knew what it was. All right, so let's try to apply this idea to the dream argument for external world skepticism. So the common sense response that Moore provides says something like, I might not be able to give a proof that I have hands, just like you weren't able to give a proof that 1 doesn't equal 2. But this is just common sense, and so I can know it without needing to prove it. Similarly, yeah, the dream argument poses a challenge and it might seem compelling, but it's common sense that I know lots of things about the external world. And so I know the dream argument makes a mistake even if I can't tell you where that mistake is. I'm more certain that I know that I have hands than any of these other claims that occur in the dream argument. Now, there are some worries, though, with this kind of response. So it's not clear exactly what counts as common sense. What makes the difference between something that's common sense and something that's not? And people's ideas about common sense seem to vary. What one person thinks is common sense, another person thinks is obviously wrong. Before Descartes' time, people might have thought it was common sense that the sun revolves around the earth and that the earth is standing still. Now, moreover, even if this response works, even if there's something commonsensical about this idea that we know that we have hands, and so we know that the dream argument must fail somehow, there's still more to learn. Even if this gives us good reason to believe that we really do know things about the external world, it doesn't tell us how we know those things. And this response, even if it lets us know that there is a mistake in the dream argument, it doesn't tell us what that mistake is, and so it doesn't help us fix our thinking. So you might want more from a response. You might want it not just tell us that we do know these things and that the dream argument is wrong. You might want a response that tells us what's wrong about the dream argument. You might want an argument that tells us how we know things about the external world. And so in this regard, remember, Descartes himself is not a skeptic. So his first meditation raises the challenge, and meditations 2 through 6 are an attempt to solve that problem, essentially. Descartes thinks the mistake in the dream argument is that it's trying to use our senses as a foundation for knowledge. And so the solution, according to Descartes, is to stop doing that, to rely on our reason instead of our senses. He says when we do this, our reason can give us knowledge of our own existence as a thinking thing. And then he thinks we can then use our reason to prove God's existence outside of our own mind. And then he thinks he can use his reason to prove that God can't be a deceiver. And then he attempts to use that supposed knowledge of God and his reason to prove that our life can't be one big dream, to rule out this doubt, not using his senses, but using his reason. Now, we're not going to look at the details of Descartes' arguments for each piece of this response. Just be aware that most philosophers today don't think Descartes' arguments are going to give us the certainty that he's trying to get. Another attempt to respond to the problem is inspired by a philosopher named Bertrand Russell. This kind of response concedes that, yeah, we can't prove with 100% certainty that the external world is anything more than a dream. We can't prove with 100% certainty that we have hands. However, this response says our senses still make it very likely that the external world and hands, coffee cups, etc. exist. And according to this response, having evidence that makes a belief likely to be true, that's good enough for knowledge. We don't need to prove it with 100% certainty. So essentially, this kind of response is rejecting this infallibilist view of knowledge that Descartes has in favor of this idea that knowledge doesn't require certainty. But this response is still going to need to explain how our senses make it more likely that there's an external world with hands and coffee cups, etc., how it makes that more likely than this idea that all these things are just a dream. Now, Russell's idea here appeals to what we called inference to the best explanation when we discussed inductive arguments in our crash course on logic. Right now, our senses are giving us coherent experiences of a physical world around us. We might ask, well, what explains that? Where do those sensory experiences come from? Now, here we can compare two kinds of explanation. There's this ordinary explanation that says our experiences are caused by an external world of physical objects that are largely similar to how we perceive them. So the reason I see a coffee cup and then taste coffee is because there really is a coffee cup outside my mind that's causing me to have this experience. Now we can compare this to the skeptical explanation. This idea that our experiences might be caused by a dream, a computer simulation, or an evil genius. Now, Russell admits that both of these explanations for why we have the experiences we do are possible. we can't be 100% certain that the skeptical hypotheses are wrong. However, he believes that the ordinary explanation provides a better explanation than these skeptical hypotheses. Now, one reason you might think that this ordinary hypothesis is better is because it just offers a simpler explanation for why our experiences fit together so well. If I was just dreaming these things, it seems like it's just a matter of luck that all my experiences fit together. Now, if this is right, if this ordinary hypothesis that there's an external world with physical objects, if that really is the better explanation, we might thereby conclude that it's probably the true one. And that's enough to know that it's right. There's a lot more to consider about knowledge and doubt and responses to skepticism. And I'd encourage students to think about more ordinary forms of doubt, ordinary cases where people say, I'm not sure that's true. Maybe it's this other way. Have you thought about that? As a way to raise doubt about what someone believes. And you might think about how you might relate those more ordinary forms of doubt to Descartes' discussion. All right, but despite the fact that there's much more to say, that's all we're going to have time for in this course. All right, I'll see you all in the next video here.